welcome to the Police Society for Problem-Based Learning podcast. We know that you want to be a problem solver for the community and a trusted partner. And in order to do that, you need to educate yourself about the new police reforming, the new educational methodology. So we understand that there are problems in our training methodology. We believe you deserve the trust in your law as a law enforcement unit. We understand all habits in training are causing distrust in the community. Let's highlight today in our podcast why in 2021 we are for the community guardian rather than the military approach to policing. So I have here with me our president Paul, Roger, our treasurer, and one of our founders, Jerry. Unfortunately, Greg hasn't joined us yet, so hopefully he gets the chance to do it. I'm going to ask Jerry, coming from your background and your experience, could you let us know a little bit about where we were in the past, where we were at right now, and where are we going in the future in regards to the police education, right, methodology?
Thanks, Milena, and thanks for hosting. My name's Gerard Cleveland. I am the co-chair, former president of Police Society for Problem-Based Learning. Educationally, I'm a former principal. I was a cop way back when, and now I'm a lawyer and I teach at a university and I teach in a law school. Milena's question is about the kind of roles the police are going to play in a modern democracy. What's happened in policing is, starting way back, if we go back to Spartans and even previously, police or guardians were there as soldiers. They were there as military men and sometimes women who could fight. And their job was to protect those who were more vulnerable for all of the reasons that we know, for safety, for security, for ongoing, viability as a community. They needed those fighters. So that's evolved down through the centuries. And I don't want to go through a history lesson here, but I do know that around 200 or 300 years ago, we started to see some changes in the societies. And those changes that happened because people said they wanted to be self-governing, and they included things like safety, security, movement, all of those dynamics that the police had previously regulated. Now the people wanted to regulate them themselves. So that's kind of a very short and perhaps maybe even somewhat light approach to how we've evolved as police. So now what do? We're in liberal democracies, and there's a legal framework that has taken over the old needs framework, the old needs being those things I mentioned, like safety and security. The new need has been documented as a constitution, as a founding document that says, here's who we are, here's who we want to be. And those founding documents have had quite a substantial effect on the role that the police play. And I guess it's appropriate to turn it over to our president and our current president, Paul Laferriere, to talk a little bit about why that's the case with these founding documents. Paul?
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Paul Laferriere. I am the president of the PSPBL. I've been a police officer for 35 years, actually just retired, and I've been a practicing attorney for 30 years. So I kind of have seen it from both sides, from both the legal aspect as well as from the law enforcement aspect. And we've seen that people are not happy with the way that law enforcement is doing their job now. They don't feel that they're representing them, that they feel that they're only representing a small portion of the community, and they feel that they're being left out and being mistreated because of the fact that the police are not necessarily representing them. And so they want change. They want the police to be more inclusive, more diverse, and they want them to represent everyone. So now how do you do that? That's where the problem comes in. And we see lately what's been happening is, besides the pandemic, of course, we've had a lot of issues with police shootings, and where become being put under the microscope. They're being put scrutinized, and rightfully so in several of the cases. But now the whole police society is now being put under the microscope also, and being scrutinized also. And so we need to change. And it's as simple as that, because people are not going to accept the same. And so how do we do that though? I've seen through my work at the police department where we've actually had protests at our police department and that, and they've been mostly peaceful, but people are looking to us to join them, to kneel with them, to be, part of their cause. Now, one faction of the police department, and I've seen it throughout the country, some factions join with them, some factions will kneel with them. And then on the other side, though, there are some factions that say, wait a second, this is not what we're supposed to be doing. We are not supposed to be politicizing what we do. That we're there for a purpose, and we're there to benefit all, and we're not supposed to take sides. And so we feel we shouldn't be catering to certain groups. So that's where the dilemma lies. So now, how do we solve that dilemma? That's the thing. And so that's what I'm going to open up for everybody, is how do we solve that dilemma between trying to be apolitical and not try to cater to anybody and that, and on the other side, trying to change the way we do business, that we include everybody. So I'll open up to
let me jump in then, Paul. Let me jump in, and then I'll just go to Roger. But I think the apoliticizing of policing is a noble goal, but it's practically impossible, given that the founding documents to which I referred earlier, the Constitution, are very political. I mean, there were revolutions that brought these things about. And if police, you're right, police can't be political, because then they just move with the ebbs and tides of the society. But what I'm suggesting is that those documents that call for freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of et cetera, they're very political. And so by taking on the function of enforcing those, the police are therefore de facto a political agency. So how do we not become politicized when the founding documents that tell us what we need to enforce is this view that every citizen has that right to protest, to speak, practice religion in the way that they want, to love whom they want. That's the sort of the razor's edge upon which policing currently rests. And I guess none of us here expect that we have an answer. All we have are a lot of difficult questions, but we have an approach to policing, if not an answer. And that approach would be in solving problems together with the community. But it isn't going to be an easy task, given those documents that we have to follow as police officers, that we're obligated to adhere to and to address.
But of course, the other way of looking at that, though, too, right now is, especially where it's almost gotten to the point where it's a us against them type of thing at the moment. Police feel very much on the defensive, that nobody likes them, nobody, wants them to back them, even though we know that that's not necessarily true, but the feeling is out there. And there are a lot of people who do feel that way. And so for us to go over and say, like you're saying, the best way to approach that is to become more involved in the community and to build partnerships with the community in that. But now, how do you do that where you're getting that backlash from the community as it is? And are they going to accept you to be able to do that? or are they going to fight you every step of the way, thinking that the only reason why you're doing that is because you have to, or or you have an ulterior motive and you're not doing it for them. So how do we get through to the communities that, hey, you know what, this is how we are going to solve the problems, and this is how we are going to make it better, by working together in partnerships and doing problem solving together and making everyone part of the solution. In that, because we're going to get the naysayers. And from both sides, we're going to get the naysayers from the police side. We're going to get the naysayers from the community side. In that, so how do we get through to them, or both sides actually, in order to make it work?
Well, I guess that's, we've always said all along that the way to do that is you put people in a room together who may have different views, and often the best defense against the ignorance, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but the ignorance of the other, how ignorant people are of what police face and how ignorant police are of what people live through every day, is often goes away once people start to know each other and they start to understand each other. So placing them in an environment of problem solving, it's almost, I won't say a trick because it's not a trick. It's almost a side benefit or a side effect of the problem solving that we're advocating. People get to know each other, and it's hard to hate somebody that you know. It's hard to make somebody a stereotype that you know. Those kinds of things happen with problem solving. So I'm convinced that if we can get people in the same room, a lot of the biases, the fear, the bigotry, those things dissipate, the stronger the relationships become. Roger, what's your thinking on that? Roger's done the right thing and muted his
There we go. Hi, all. Yeah, my name's Roger Bulis. I'm a retired police officer and sergeant from the city of Richmond Police Department in California. I started working in '86 and ended my career in 2012 with a service retirement. And I've been the past president of the Police Society, and I'm the current treasurer. And so this topic is interesting to me. And I think what I would like to do is maybe for me, kind of marry the topic that Paul and Jerry have both been talking about by talking about my experience. I know that there's a lot of data out there of what Jerry's been talking about and what Paul's been talking about. We've all seen it in policing culture. But talking about from what I've seen in my career. So I learned in the academy the whole Sir Robert Peel thing. And here's where I'm going to go with this. In the end, what I want to wrap up with, and this is where I'm going to go, is I think that the key to what we're talking about is connections with the community. And I think that what we're talking about is politics, not in the sense of being red or blue or liberal or conservative or any of those kind of politics. I see politics in the traditional, what the Greeks meant when they said the word politics, which is quote unquote, in service to citizen and state. That's the definition of politics. So policing, we can't do policing without politics, because it means to be in service to citizen and state, and that's what we do. So I learned in the academy, the Sir Robert Peel, we're part of the fabric of the community and all that jazz. And we know that policing began that way, where the beat officer knew everybody who was in their beat. If a kid smashed a window, the beat officer would be able to snatch up that kid, take the kid home. The parents would take care of the discipline of that kid. And that's because the beat officer knew that beat and the people in his beat so well. We all know that in the advent of the 60s and 70s with police cars and police radios, that cops started to lose a little bit of that connection with the communities, and they were driving through, and incident response became the key priority for police officers. And then, so that brings me up to the beginning of my career in 1986, where we were full in on incident response, and that's all we did. We responded from call to call. And 1986 was kind of the height of the beginning of the crack epidemic. And I worked in an area that was kind of low income and was hit pretty hard with the crack epidemic. So call to call was what we did. And on graveyard, all night long, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, we'd be responding to family fights, people breaking into homes that were occupied by people sleeping, drug addicts walking around, drug deals going down, shootings. It was call to call all the time, 24/7. So then in the 90s, community policing happened, and it became a philosophy that was promoted by the cops office and the Department of Justice and from the president on down. And a lot of money came into to police agencies because of community-oriented policing. So if you were an agency and you said you were doing community-oriented policing, then you could get some federal funds, and that was an awesome thing. So many agencies tried it with small units and did some problem-solving things. They didn't adopt it as an entire philosophy for the entire agency. And so that kind of brings us up to even now, where I know that there are different degrees of agencies who are using community-oriented policing philosophies to connect with the community to varying degrees. Some agencies do it really well and say that they're doing it really well, and they are right. Some agencies on the other end of the spectrum don't want to do it, don't have any interest in doing it. They're just kind of doing the incident response thing. And I think we would probably say that maybe they're involved in the warrior mindset as opposed to the guardian mindset. I'm not sure, but and then in between, we have folks who are, saying that they're doing community policing, but then, maybe not doing it as well as the community would like to see them do it. Which brings me toward the end of my career, where we had a chief who, you can look it up online who it was, and he fundamentally changed how the Richmond Police Department perceived our job, from the beat officer all the way up to the command staff. We started with the command staff, but all the way down to the beat officer, how you signed up for your shift each year, what was expected of you, what was expected, and what you could expect in your evaluation based on how you connected with the community and how you solve problems with the community. And so I think that that's what we're talking about, that we're missing nowadays with the problem solving aspect of, and the community oriented policing aspect of our profession. It's that connectivity. And if we think about politics in policing, to me, it's in service to citizen and state. So the things that I do should be thought of in terms of, how is this serving the people in my community? Or how is this serving the greater good of what the penal code requires, the state of here in California, the people of the California. So that's kind of what I think about when I'm thinking about this community-oriented policing and what we're doing now, and whether we're successful or not successful is how well we're connecting with our community. If we're not trying, then I don't think the community is going to be very happy. I'll add one last thing, and that's that I saw in the city of Richmond, as our agency became fully on board with the community-oriented policing process, it became an officer safety tool. And that's that. What I mean by that is that, first of all, homicides and crime went down. You can look at the stats and you'll see that crime went down in the 2000s, the late 2000s, because we had people who were willing to call us and talk to us and tell us who were doing things, who were committing crimes. If we're not connected with the community, we're not going to have people who are willing to call us. They're going to be afraid to call us. Second, I said it was an officer safety thing, and it was. Nobody in a neighborhood is going to let their beat officer get beaten up on the street by some thug who they don't know or they would rather see put in jail. They're going to take the cop side if they connect with that cop, because that cop is a friend to them. And that's the way we need it. And for me, that's like down at the granular level of police work, that kind of officer safety and connectivity that we need with the community is, I think, what we're talking about. And so again, in service to citizen and state.
Roger, that's a great summary. That's a great summary of maybe putting together what Paul and I were saying. So if I could take up the narrative, what happens right at the beginning of 2000 is, in spite of this incredible need to do what Roger has said, to join with the community, to sort of forego the old style of just being somebody who is out there to do one thing, and that's to stop crime, and thinking that they would do it on their own. The evolution of community policing, saying, no, we need to engage the community with that. Well, the fact of the matter is, and those of you out there who are watching this podcast know that didn't happen in agencies across the country. There was a high moment for it, maybe in the 90s and then into the early 2000s, but we were seeing that go away. We saw more of a militaristic approach, more of a separation from the community. And as that happened, this whole idea of what Roger's been talking about of in service to the community started to fade and started to be marginalized against the need for safety, the whole be safe, protection, all of that kind of warrior approach, which is fine. You have that times, you have to be a warrior. But when we came in to design the PTO, and when we came in with problem solving and emotional intelligence, and we brought this agency, the Police Society for Problem-Based Learning, brought that into the policing sphere, there was a lot of resistance to it. And then, like every movement, it started to gain some acceptance, and we're not sure where we are right now. So, I'll be quite honest with us. We are still in that battle. Are we going to work with the community in a cooperative way, or are we going to fight with our communities? And our determination as a society was the best way to do that, to change both policing and working with the community, was to do it through education within policing. And what I'll do is I'll turn it over to my co-writer, co-director, and co-founder, Greg Seville, who was part of that early movement that said we have to educate from not just the top down, but from the bottom up, which is how PTO arose. So I'll turn it over to Greg, and why we're talking about education as a political factor, because it's the politics of the tribe. And I'll get Greg to describe a little bit of that for you in this evolution of policing towards problem solving, problem-based learning, and a PTO program. Greg, just intro yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I'm Greg Seville, one of the members of the Police Society for Problem-Based Learning, former police officer and a criminologist, and a trainer of police in many areas, including problem solving and problem-oriented policing and problem-based learning. So yeah, joining the conversation late here, this has been a problem. This has been a crisis moment, particularly in American policing. I think it trickles down to parts of Canada and Australia and Europe as well, and the UK. And it has been a shift. It has been a shift over the last 20 some years since, I say, 2011. Probably not 9/11 is probably when I think the big transition occurred, the hinge in history from a lot of movement and work in community policing and problem solving into what became known as the combat policing style or the militaristic style. And, it's been an uphill battle for a lot of folks. I'm part of the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing, which is really, in my view, the substantive part of community policing that has legs. I mean, when I hear community policing, I don't see the cops in schools. I don't see the community relations side of it. I see the problem solving, the problem-oriented policing led by Herman Goldstein. And we have PBL today in policing because of that movement. It was that movement that said, we need police to go out of their old training systems into a new training system that lets them think more like problem solvers and let them think critically and use problem solving. And the old training systems weren't doing that. So we were asked to craft a new kind of training. We use problem-based learning. That's how it started. Jerry and I sat down originally in 1998 in Florida. with a trial run, a pilot study, and then later in 2000, 2001, as the towers were coming down, ironically in New York, here we were on the other side of the country, evolving a whole new kind of problem-solving, community-based policing. Little did we know that it would be undercut by the very crisis and turbulence that we were seeing in front of our eyes on television. And so problem order policing has been around for a long time, 35, 40 years. And, I mean, I remember the heyday, the golden days of problem order policing, when cops would bring projects from all over the world, and they bring projects from across America, and they would show how they cut homicide in Boston by 60%, how they cut domestic assault in parts of the Midwest, how they cut motel crime, drug dealing, and gangs in Chula Vista, California by 90%. I mean, these were hundreds and hundreds of amazing projects that made major differences in the lives of people and cut crime. Why didn't it last? What went on? What happened? And what happened was the Problem Order Policing Conference went from 1,200 delegates in the late 90s to 200 delegates, to 200 or 300 delegates currently. And that tells you everything you need to know. There's no interest anymore. They want to buy military armed personnel carriers and night vision goggles and grenade launchers, and they just don't see the value in it. In spite of the fact that crime's gone down, and the number of officers killed is now down to like 60 felonious killed by handguns, the lowest number of felonious assaults against police officers in 50 years. And yet, in spite of all that, we still can't embed the PBL into more than a half dozen academies, and the PTL training program into more than maybe 50, maybe 100. So why is that? I'm going to put it to the panel. Why is that?
So just listening, and I'm coming from a different background, right? Listening to Jerry and Raj and you, Greg, it just start clicking some areas. And one of the things I start thinking is that history in America, I'm not from US, I'm not an American, but I've seen over and over and over again, willing to change, right? There's that willingness to change. We are in a very cautious time for sure, but it made me think about that movie, The Best of Enemies, and it's maybe not related to policing, but it was related about how the mandate came from above, from that governor or mayor, or I don't remember what it was, or the federal. You have to deal with this issue that is happening in Durham, North Carolina. So it trickled down from top to the bottom, and they make these two like opposite individuals work together, right? And they force them to eat together, like Jerry mentioned, for sure. So I believe now we need to start thinking, how can we mix these things? I believe we have the tools, but we don't have the right leadership in place. As you mentioned, people are taking camps on each side. It's either you're right or you're wrong. You're not trying to come to the middle ground, because we're so self-centered in our own problems that we're not seeing somebody else's, and we cannot be empathetic towards that community and how they're perceiving me, right? And also it comes down to also again the type of mentality. I see American movies about cops, and I'm sorry, I do see it, and I see is the die hard. I'm gonna go and fight and be the warrior, right? That's a totally stereotype policing that everybody has. Unfortunately, the Hollywood and the media has provided that avenue, right? So it's interesting that you mentioned that in 9/11, once maybe there was a small wave, things changed again for the other side. And I start thinking about these police departments and the money that they're spending in equipment and tactical equipment. How much millions of dollars are going into that, instead of actually trying to put some better training to their cops? I'm very sure that they don't need that tank, or I'm not sure the robot to go inside in a very secure anti-bomb unit. I'm very sure in certain areas is necessarily, but yes, there's been a lot of dramatization as well on how people are taking policing, right? And how they're approaching policing too, that not the right individuals that we want them to be in policing, they're actually applying for policing too. So it's just a small perspective as a non-cop or as a community member.
Milena, you make valid points. And while I don't necessarily agree that many American police officers think that everything is like Hollywood movies. I really don't think that they maybe that glorifies the policing profession to cause people to want to get into it, to recruit people into it, that, it looks like it's all fun. But after about a year of policing anywhere in America, you realize it's not the movies. And that's, so I don't know that it's that, but I do think that we need to acknowledge that that the American police officers often deal with people in their lowest moments, and they deal with a lot of people who other people don't want to deal with. And so what that does is it causes a sense of cynicism in policing. There becomes sometimes an entitlement mentality in policing. And I think that, as hard as it is for me to say, because I worked with a lot of great people in policing, and not just in Richmond, but throughout the nation, and in Australia and New Guinea and Canada. And so I've seen police all over the world, and I know that there's a lot of great police officers. But I think that it's fair to say that some officers develop a cynical outlook. And so that's why I would say that the Police Society for Problem-Based Learning and PBL and the PTO training and the problem-based learning training, and especially the emotional intelligence training that we bring into our profession, is critical, because people, cops, need to begin to realize they need to develop those self-awareness skills about what is their attitude about their job and their life. I mean, have they so closely tied their identity to their who they are, that everybody is an asshole and that everything is bad, and they can't see the good in people, or those kinds of things. So that self-awareness piece, self-regulation. How do you motivate yourself to come to work every day and see people for who they really are, and to have some empathy for them, and to connect with them? And so the social awareness piece, the relationship management piece, all those pieces of emotional intelligence are how we get out of that. And that's kind of what I think. So again, it comes back to the connectivity piece for me, but it starts with the emotional intelligence piece, which is what we're doing here, which I think is critical. So
that's fantastic summary, Raj. I guess while we end this podcast, if it's okay with you, Milena, just before you close us out, it's probably good to hear from Paul, who's probably been teaching the PTO program longer than anybody. And I guess, Paul, what I'd ask is, can you get us to give us a view of what you see when you start the course, when you finish the course, when you do your follow-ups? Give us some view of the movement you see with people, or some of the challenges, some of the benefits, whatever. Like, I think we haven't heard enough from you, given how much you've taught this course across the country.
Well, I'll let you know. We actually came in as one of the test sites back in, what was it, 2001, I believe. 6 test sites that, and I believe Roger was part of it also, where we were just learning it at the beginning. And I'm not going to say anything about how you guys taught it, but let's just put it to you this way. It's a 5-day course, 40 hours in that. And after the 4 days, we were still all scratching our heads trying to figure out what the hell you guys were talking about. It was kind of, and then the light bulb moment went off. And then it was like, oh, so this is what it's all about. And so then once we figured out what was going on, we said, you know what, this will work. And so when I wrote up my own program, which you can do, once you're done, as far as to get it to fit into your department's mold to make it work for your department, because it's very fluid. We started then teaching it to our people, and it was an amazing transition, to tell you the truth, because we have the old school kind of guys, and we had quite a few old school kind of guys that started this at the beginning, especially at the very beginning. we had had a PTO, I'm in an FTO program that was going on at the time. And actually, I was in charge of that FTO program at the very end. And what it ended up happening was people ended up leaving being trainers for the FTO program because of the fact that it wasn't producing the right results. I mean, people were getting sent through just because, and they were being put over the wall just because. And then somebody would make it through, and then all of a sudden, when something happened and that person screwed up or something, they'd go back and say they should have got rid of him back then. But nobody ever done anything about it. And so people got frustrated. So it came time to do the PTO. And by that time, the people who were FTOs were like, yeah, you know what? I'm done. I really don't want to do anything. And so we kind of had to take anybody we could take. And some of them were very rough around the edges. And some of them, you know, it was hard getting through to some people. But it was, and one specific person, it was really telling. It was funny because once we started, they all were there and they're like trying to figure out what's going on, just like we did when we started it. And about into the second or third day, and we had them take home a few reading articles to read and stuff like that. And one guy who'd been on for 25 years or so, or whatever, came in and he said to me, he goes, you know what? I get it now. He goes, this is great stuff. He goes, I was trying to figure out what you were doing for these last 2 days. And you kind of were like making us do everything. And we were kind of like learning ourselves how to do this stuff and everything. And I was trying to figure it out. And now I know why, because that's what we're going to have to do ourselves when we're on the street. We have to figure it out for ourselves. And he goes, and I love this stuff. And I'll tell you, it came from back then that they finally get the light bulb moments to now when I'm training these new kids, they're getting it like that. It's almost like I'm into the first or second day and they're all like, yeah, we got it. And I'm like, well, wait a second. This usually doesn't happen. I'm usually waiting for the light bulb moment, but they're already like, yeah, no, let's go on to the next thing. We already got it. And I'm like, okay, all right. And they actually do. They have it because they kind of are looking at it from a differently than the way we used to look at it, because we were all cynical and we were set in our ways. And these new kids aren't. They're willing to learn. And so now we see that the way that we were teaching it and the way they're learning and the way they're using it afterwards produce a much better police officer, a much better relationship between them and the community. And that's why, in all honesty, I believe in regards to a lot of the issues we have, that are going on throughout the country, that even though we're half decent sized city and that, we don't have that much divisiveness between us and the community because of the fact that we've been working with them so long and partnering with them and building those relationships that they accept us as we are. And so we don't have to deal with that. And it came up with the same issues that we were talking about, that, the cop that was on the beat, they knew that guy, and hey, they were going to back that guy no matter what. That's kind of the relationships that they have with their police officers. They know their police officers and they know them by first name and they know everything about them, and their police officers know them. And so that's what you're looking for. And that's what we end up getting now.
Hey,
And
Paul, can I ask you one question about that?
sure.
Just one question about that last comment you made about it's what they're doing that matters and it's the actual problem solving. I'm pretty convinced that it's the PBLE part of the program, the problem-based learning exercise, the actual project that the officer and the recruit have to go and do in the community. That
Right.
experience right from the get-go of their career that inculcates this connection. It's my opinion and my philosophy that this is the thing that can make the difference in the future. Because if they change the Hollywood movies, the ones that Melena's watching, and they put the reality in there, the cops spend 2 hours doing paperwork and then an hour on traffic direction and then an hour directing, an hour giving tickets off for speeding. I mean, the mundane things, you realize they're hacking at the branches, the problems, they're not digging at the roots. But this PBLE stuff, the problem solving stuff, it really digs at the roots. My feeling is that's where the rubber meets the road with these new recruits. Am I right on that?
Yeah, absolutely right. And it brings out, that relationship portion where they have to go into the community. They have to build the partnerships, whether they want to or not. Whereas, when I first came on, it was like, here, kid, here's a set of keys. You're in car 3. Have a nice night. And that was it. And that's how you learned. And you went out there, you drove around, checked your buildings, you looked and saw if anybody was doing anything. But did you ever we never really stopped and get out of the car and talk to anybody or did anything like that. It was just more, you were there and you went from one call to another, and that's how you worked. And a lot of places, that's still how they work. But we find that now the way that we're doing it, and we're putting more people on foot and in the neighborhoods, and that we don't have as many of those repeat calls and have to keep going in that, because we're solving them the first times, because these people are actually, our officers are carrying around their cards. They're giving the cards out to their neighborhoods. And they're actually getting calls all the time and stuff. Hey, this is what's going on. Can you help us out with this and everything? And it can be as mundane as trash on the sidewalk to somebody stealing tires off of somebody's car or whatever. But it's what's important to them. And as long as you make that important to you, that's what's going to build that relationship. And that's how you're going to get things done.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, everyone, for this great conversation. A couple of points there for sure. These PTO and PBL programs, as a new individual that is coming with maybe not a past experience in the field, it's very easy. It's kind of like a sponge, I call them, to absorb anything new. And if you're training them properly, they're going to take a different attitude towards the community for sure, since that beginning step, like Greg mentioned, for sure. I see that light bulb moment happening also with the students that on the PBL. Sometimes like, oh, I get it. I'm like, yeah, there you go. And those are the type of people that you want to have at the end, those lifelong learners, that they're just trying to be a better individual, not for just themselves, but also for the community around them. So thank you so much for listening to us, for watching us, wherever you are. Email us your questions or comments at info@pspbl.com. Check out our website as well for upcoming training or seminars that we will have for free for you guys, or enroll into our membership for $50. Thank you so much, and have an excellent morning, afternoon, or evening.
Have a good one, guys.